They thought my memory was gone. They thought grief had made me soft, and they were counting on it. When I told my son and daughter-in-law I was changing my will to give them more, I watched their eyes. It was not gratitude. It was calculation. So I set a trap, using the one thing they craved, my money. What I found was not just greed. It was a plan to make me disappear. My name is Josephine. I am 62 years old. For 35 of those years, I was a financial analyst for the Mid-Valley Insurers Group. I spent my life calculating risk, analyzing patterns, and predicting outcomes. It is a skill that has stayed with me in retirement. I live alone now, in the large, quiet house in Willow Creek that I shared with my husband, David. The house is too big for one person, filled with the echoes of his laugh and the scent of his old books. 6 months ago, that quiet was broken. My son, Mark, and his wife, Bianca, moved in. Their reason sounded urgent, almost rehearsed a pipe-burst disaster at their apartment, a catastrophe that apparently ruined everything and left them with sudden, overwhelming financial difficulties. At first, I was relieved. The silence in this house can be suffocating. I craved the noise of family, the warmth of connection. I imagined dinners together, conversations, the simple presence of people who were supposed to love me. But that initial relief has curdled into something else. Now, 6 months later, I feel like a guest being tolerated in my own home. The changes started small. Bianca, with her bright, tight smile, decided to optimize my kitchen. My heavy, seasoned cast-iron pans, the ones David and I had used for decades, were the first to go. They were replaced by a sleek, non-stick set that warps if the heat gets too high. "These are so much healthier, Josephine," she announced, as if my decades of cooking were a health hazard, "and much easier to clean." When I tried to find my mother's roasting pan, she told me it was donated, that it was cluttering up the space. Mark, my own son, just waves away my concerns. When I mention that I cannot find my favorite gardening shears or that the thermostat is always set too low, he laughs. It is not a kind laugh. "Mum, you are being old-fashioned," he said last week, patting my hand. "You are just being forgetful." Forgetful. That is the word they use most often. A new, more chilling detail has emerged. My blood pressure medication. I have taken the same small white pill every morning for 10 years. I know exactly how many should be in the bottle at any given time. For the past 2 weeks, the bottle seems to be emptying faster than it should. Significantly faster. When I brought it up to Bianca, her smile was immediate and slick. "Oh, Josephine," she cooed. "I am just helping you organize your weekly doses into the pill minder. You must have forgotten you took them. I have never used a pill minder in my life. So, I started a new routine. When she hands me the glass of water in the morning, I pretend to take the pill. I practice the motion. A dry swallow. A slight nod of thanks. I hold it under my tongue until she turns away. Then I spit it into a tissue and hide it in my robe pocket. I flush them down the toilet when I'm alone. It has been 4 days since I have actually swallowed one of those pills. I should feel dizzy, my head pounding. Instead, I feel sharper. The fog I had been living in, the one I attributed to grief, is lifting. With that clarity comes a cold, sharp fear. Last night, I confirmed it. I was walking past David's old study, the room Mark and Bianca have claimed as their home office. The door was cracked. I heard them whispering. It was Mark's voice, low and impatient. Just be patient. She cannot stay lucid forever. We need the paperwork. I stopped breathing. I stood frozen in the hallway, the carpet scratching my bare feet. Paperwork. Lucid. These were not words used by a son worried about his mother's health. These were words used by someone waiting for an opportunity. The vague anxiety that had been living in my chest for months finally found its shape. They are not just being inconvenient. They are not just disrespectful. They are waiting. And I am starting to think they are trying to help that wait along. The word paperwork echoed in my head for a full day. It was an analyst's word, a word used to close a deal, to finalize a hostile takeover. I was the asset they were trying to liquidate, backed into a corner. I realized I could not just wait for them to make the next move. I had to force their hand. I had to see just how far they were willing to go. My family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, has handled our affairs for 20 years. He is sharp, loyal, and knew David well. He is also the first person Mark would call if he suspected anything. No, I could not use Henderson. Instead, I drove to a neighboring town, a 40-minute trip. I found a small, dusty law office above a bakery. Jenkins and Associates? Mr. Jenkins was semi-retired and smelled of pipe tobacco. He was perfect. I paid him cash to draft a simple, convincing, and entirely fake last will and testament. He did not ask many questions. He just took my $200. That evening, I waited until Bianca served her bland chicken and overcooked green beans. I picked at my food, playing the part of the frail widow. Then, I set the hook. I did something interesting today, I said, my voice intentionally a little shaky. I met with a lawyer. The silence in the room was immediate and absolute. Mark's fork clattered against his plate and fell to the floor. Bianca, who had been lifting her water glass, froze. Her smile, that ever-present mask, became brittle. "Oh," she said, her voice strained. That is a wise thing to do. Josephine, getting your affairs in order." "Yes," I said, looking right at her. "I have been thinking. With David gone, and you two here, I decided to make some important changes to the will." I watched them. Mark had not bothered to pick up his fork. He was staring at me, his eyes wide and hungry. Bianca set her glass down so carefully it did not make a sound. "I am leaving the house and the entire estate to both of you," I said, letting the lie roll off my tongue. 50-50. Split right down the middle. I just want to know that you are both taken care of when I am gone. The relief that washed over them was so thick I could have bottled it. It was a physical thing, a collective exhale. Mark's shoulders sagged, and Bianca's smile finally, genuinely, reached her eyes. But the relief was gone in a second, replaced by a sick, buzzing eagerness. They were already spending my money. They were already living in this house without me. That very night, the new routine began. Around 9 o'clock, Bianca came to my bedroom carrying a steaming mug on a small tray. "I brewed you some special herbal tea, Josephine," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It is an old family recipe. It is wonderful for memory, and it will help you get a good night's sleep." I looked at the dark, murky liquid. It smelled faintly of anise and damp earth. "Thank you, dear," I murmured. "That is so thoughtful." I let her watch me take a small sip, pretending to savor it. It is lovely. I lied. When she left, satisfied, I walked over to the large potted fern in the corner of my room. I poured the rest of the tea directly into the soil. I did this the next night, and the night after that. By the fourth day, the fern's vibrant green fronds were turning a sickly yellow-brown at the edges. They got bolder. 2 days after my announcement, Mark approached me after dinner. Bianca stood just behind him, her hand on his back. "Mom," he started, his voice a careful blend of filial duty and business. "We were talking about the will." "Oh," I said, feigning confusion. "We just want to make sure everything is clear. Legally." Bianca chimed in, stepping forward. "These things can be so complicated. We would feel much better if we could just look over the new draft. You know, to ensure all the language is correct. We do not want any trouble for you later." They were insisting on seeing it. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted to hold the proof of their inheritance in their hands. This was the moment. I let my face crumple, as if overwhelmed by their concern. "Oh, I do not know," I stammered, pressing my fingers to my temple. "It is all just words on paper. Mr. Jenkins said it was fine." "Please, Mom," Mark pushed, his voice hardening just a fraction. "For our peace of mind." I let the silence stretch, as if considering it. "Well," I finally sighed, pretending to give in. "If it would make you feel better, I suppose I have a copy. It is in my desk." I walked slowly to David's study, retrieved the folded, official-looking document Mr. Jenkins had prepared. I handed it to them. It was a decoy, but to them, it was a promise. It was the confirmation they needed. I watched them take it, their hands eager, and I knew I had them. Holding the fake will had satisfied them for the moment, but it had also made them more attentive. Bianca's herbal tea became a non-negotiable part of my evenings. They were watching me, waiting for the results of their efforts. I was playing my part well, the forgetful, frail widow, but I was acting in a vacuum. I had no idea what their next move was, only that the tea in my fern was turning the soil toxic. I could not do this alone. I needed outside verification. I needed a witness. My gaze kept drifting to the house next door. Arthur. He is 70 years old, a widower like me. He had been a sound engineer for a broadcast company for 40 years before he retired. He and David used to spend hours discussing electronics and sound systems. Arthur is a quiet man, a man who observes. He spends most of his days in his garden or his workshop, always watching, always listening. I waited until I saw Mark and Bianca leave in their car, heading toward the mall. I walked over to Arthur's house, my heart pounding with a strange mix of shame and resolve. He invited me in, his workshop smelling of solder and old wood. "Arthur," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I am going to tell you something that will make me sound insane, or senile, or both." I told him everything. I told him about the pipe burst and the 6 months of feeling like a stranger in my home. I told him about the missing pills, the fake will, and the nightly special tea that was killing my houseplants. I explained that I was pretending to drink it, pretending to be fading. As I spoke, I felt a wave of humiliation. I was accusing my only son. "I must sound like a foolish old woman," I finished, my hands clenched in my lap. Arthur did not laugh. He did not look at me with pity. He just sat on his stool, listening intently. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. You do not sound insane, Josephine, he said, his voice quiet but firm. You sound observant. I have found it strange, too. I looked up, surprised. What have you seen? A white van, he said, standing up and walking to his window, which had a clear view of my driveway. Unmarked. No company logo. It has been to your house 3 times in the last week alone. Always on Sunday morning, right after you leave for church. It stays for about 10 minutes, then leaves. My blood ran cold. I have not had any visitors. I have not ordered any services. The driver, Arthur continued, is a man in cheap scrubs. I looked up the partial plate I managed to get. It is registered to a Priority Home Healthcare Service, a company that does not seem to have a website or a listed address. We stood in silence, the implication hanging heavy in the air. They were bringing strangers into my house when I was gone. Assessors, perhaps, sizing up the property or, God forbid, me. I have also seen them in your backyard, Arthur added. Mark and Bianca. They stand by the far fence line, where they think no one can hear them. They are always whispering, very intense. Not the behavior of a couple just enjoying the fresh air. He turned back to me, his eyes sharp. They think you are an analog woman in a digital world, Josephine. They think you are old, you are fading, and you are irrelevant. He walked over to a workbench covered in wires and circuit boards. They have forgotten what our generation knows. They are careless with their technology. But we do not have to be. He held up a small, mundane object. It looked like the front plate of a standard electrical outlet. This is a voice-activated digital recorder, he said. The microphone is pinhole-sized. The battery lasts for days, and it records only when it hears voices. The sound quality is exceptional. He pointed toward my house. They are using David's old study. You said their home office. I nodded. There is an old outlet under the desk, near the baseboard. They will never see it. They will think it is just part of the house, like you. He offered me the device. They think they are the only ones with a plan. Let us show them they are wrong. I took the small, white, plastic square. It felt heavy in my hand. The idea of planting a bug, of spying on my own son, felt like a betrayal. But then I thought of the dying fern, the whispers in the hall, and the unmarked white van. The fear of what they were hiding was far greater than the guilt of finding it out. Yes, I said, my voice hardening. Let us use their assumptions against them. We did not have to wait long. That Friday, 2 nights later, they announced they were going out. Just a movie, Mum, Mark said, far too cheerfully. A little celebration. A celebration of what? I wondered. Their future inheritance, the moment their car cleared the driveway. Arthur was at my back door. He was all business, carrying a small toolkit. He went straight to David's study, knelt by the desk, and had the old outlet cover off and the new one installed in less than 5 minutes. It was identical to the old one, just cleaner. It will start recording the second it picks up a voice, he whispered, his hands moving with practiced speed. It will stop when it is silent. The memory card is in this slot. He tapped a tiny, invisible seam. Swap it out every morning before they get up. Bring it to me. He was gone before they even would have reached the theatre. That night, I barely slept. I was a spy in my own house, waiting. The next morning, I was up at 5, my hands shaking. I retrieved the tiny card and replaced it with a fresh one. I walked over to Arthur's house in my robe, the pre-dawn air cold on my skin. We sat in his workshop, him slotting the card into a reader on his computer. The first day's recording was mundane. It was hours of silence punctuated by typing. Then, their voices, complaining. Bianca was annoyed about a credit card bill. Mark was frustrated with his boss. They sounded like any other couple, stressed and petty. It was almost disappointing. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined everything. I swapped the card again the next morning. Sunday. I went to church as usual, the unmarked white van haunting my peripheral vision. I returned home, feigned a nap, and then, under the cover of dusk, I took the second card to Arthur. He plugged it in. We listened. At first, more silence. Then, Bianca's voice, clear as a bell. She was on the phone. "No, I told you. He is not a doctor," she was saying, her tone sharp and professional. "He is an assessor. It is better this way, less of a paper trail. We just need her to seem out of it at the right moment. The confusion is the key." My stomach tightened. An assessor. A moment later, the recording captured the sound of the study door opening. Mark's voice. "Who was that?" "Just confirming the appointment," Bianca said. There was a smugness in her tone that made my skin crawl. And that fake will was perfect. It makes her think she is in control. It keeps her happy and complacent while we get the real work done. I gripped the edge of Arthur's workbench. The room tilted. They knew. They knew the will was a fake. I had not been setting a trap. I had been walking into theirs. I was not the analyst. I was the mark. They were not playing chess. They were playing a different game entirely, one I had not even seen. "So what about that herbal tea?" Mark asked. His voice was no longer that of my son. It was the voice of a stranger, a co-conspirator. "Is it working? She just seems sleepy to me." "It is working," Bianca snapped, her confidence chilling. "It is a cumulative formula. It is designed to create confusion, disorientation, short-term memory lapses. When the assessor gets here, she will not be able to answer basic questions. She will not know the date or who the president is. She will be the perfect picture of a senile old woman." There was a pause. I could hear the sound of a pen tapping on the desk. "And then," Bianca continued, her voice dropping to a satisfied purr, "we get the medical conservatorship, full control of everything. Her accounts, her investments, her property. Not after she is dead. Mark. Right now." Arthur and I just looked at each other. He slowly reached over and stopped the playback. The silence in the workshop was deafening. It was never about the will. They were not waiting for me to die. They were planning to have me declared legally dead while I was still breathing. They were not trying to get my money. They were trying to get my life. I walked back to my room from Arthur's workshop, the recording playing over and over in my mind. Conservatorship. Assessor. Confusion. It all clicked into place. My blood pressure medication, the pills they were likely swapping or adding to, were meant to make me physically weak, to create the symptoms of a stroke or a heart condition. The herbal tea was the second prong of the attack, designed to fog my mind, to make me fail their test. It was a dual-front war, one against my body, one against my mind. That night, when Bianca brought the tray to my room, I had to force myself to smile. My hand was shaking, but this time, it was not an act. "Drink up, Josephine," she said, her voice like syrup. "You seem tired today. You have been so forgetful." I reached for the steaming mug, my mind racing. I needed a sample. I needed proof of what was in it. As I took the mug, I let my hand jerk, as if startled by a sudden, senile tremor. "Oh, dear," I cried out. The hot, dark liquid splashed over my hand, onto my nightgown, and pooled on the thick Persian rug by my bed. It stung, but I barely felt it. Bianca hissed in frustration. "Ugh, really? This rug is silk." "Josephine." She threw the towel from the tray onto the floor, but it was not enough. "Stay there. Do not move. I will get the cleaning supplies." The moment her footsteps faded down the hall, I dropped to my knees. The rug was soaked, the pungent, earthy smell filling the air. I grabbed the tissue I had hidden in my sleeve. I scooped up a small, sodden clump of the leaves and dregs, folded the tissue quickly, and shoved it deep into my robe pocket. When Bianca returned, I was dabbing at my nightgown, cooing apologies, the perfect picture of a clumsy, embarrassed old woman. She spent 20 minutes scrubbing the floor, muttering under her breath. It gave me all the time I needed to calm my breathing. After she left, I waited another hour. Then, I crept downstairs to the optimized kitchen. Her specialty was in a simple, unmarked tin on the spice shelf. I opened it, took a small pinch of the dry leaves, and sealed it in another tissue. The next morning, I told them I was volunteering for the church's charity drive, sorting donations. "Such lovely work." "Mum?" Mark said, not even looking up from his phone. I drove straight to Arthur's. I handed him the 2 samples, one wet, one dry, both wrapped in tissue. He did not flinch. "I have a friend," he said, his voice low. "He retired from pharmaceuticals, runs a small private analysis lab now. He values discretion and cash." Arthur made the call. He spoke in quiet, technical terms. An hour later, I was driving to a nondescript office park 30 miles away. I handed an envelope containing $500 in cash to a man in a lab coat who did not ask for my name. He just looked at the samples. "The analysis will take time," he said. "I need it fast," I said. He looked at the envelope. 24 hours? The next day was the longest of my life. I had to continue the charade. I had to pretend to drink the tea Bianca brewed, finding new and inventive places to dump it. The fern was too obvious. I started pouring it into an old, empty moisturizer jar in my bathroom. I forgot Mark's name, calling him David. I lost my keys twice. They were practically giddy with my decline. That evening, I retrieved the latest memory card from the outlet. I felt too exposed to go to Arthur's. I used an old card reader David had owned and plugged it into my personal laptop. I put on headphones and listened. More mundane chatter. Then Mark's voice. He was alone, speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes, I am just calling to confirm the policy details. Policy number 348821. Yes, Josephine." He spelled my last name. "I am just reviewing her estate, and I wanted to clarify one of the clauses, the one regarding accidental death." My heart stopped. "Right," he continued, and I could hear him tapping a pen. "So, if, for example, she had an accident at home, a fall down the stairs, perhaps, or, say, an adverse reaction to something, would that be covered under the standard payout? And what is the time frame for that payout? 90 days, I see." "Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you." The recording clicked off. I sat in the dark, the headphones hissing with silence. They were not just planning to make me incompetent. They were making contingency plans for my death. An accident. An adverse reaction. They were covering all their bases. The fog of war was gone, replaced by a terrible, cold, and absolute clarity. I slept in my clothes that night, sitting in the armchair, listening. The recording of Mark's call to the insurance company was a metronome in my head. Accidental death, adverse reaction, payout. I was watching the clock, waiting for Arthur. I did not dare check my own email. At 8:45 in the morning, his text came through. It was just 2 words, report is in. I walked out of my house without saying a word to Mark or Bianca, who were eating breakfast in the kitchen, radiating smug contentment. They smiled at me as I passed. I did not smile back. I crossed the lawn to Arthur's workshop and locked the door behind me. He had the report open on his computer screen, but he had also printed a copy. He looked exhausted. He had not slept either. "It is worse than we thought, Josephine," he said, skipping the pleasantries. He handed me the printed pages. There were 5 of them, dense with chemical terminology. "It is not poison, not in the legal sense. It is a masterpiece of malice." I read the summary at the end. The lab had identified the mixture. It was a sophisticated blend of several herbal compounds, primarily valerian root, passion flower, and a concentrated extract of skullcap. Individually, they were harmless, all legal, all sold as supplements for calm and sleep. Then I read the analysis. When taken in combination with the subject's prescribed beta blocker, the report stated, "This mixture initiates a severe and volatile synergistic reaction. The compounds aggressively inhibit the medication's intended function, causing unpredictable and dangerous swings in cardiac rhythm. The user would experience profound cognitive fog, severe vertigo, acute short-term memory loss, and sudden, intense heart palpitations." My hand went to my chest. I had felt that just 2 days ago. A sudden flutter, a greying of my vision that I had dismissed as panic. "It is all there, Josephine," Arthur said, his voice tight with anger. "The symptoms they are creating are the exact symptoms they need to prove age-related cognitive decline, or a series of transient ischemic attacks. They are manufacturing the evidence." I read the final damning sentence of the conclusion. "Prolonged use, defined as daily ingestion over 10 to 14 days, will create a cumulative cardiovascular strain. This strain is highly likely to result in a critical medical event, such as a catastrophic fall resulting from the vertigo, or a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. A fall down the stairs, an adverse reaction, an accidental death at home." They were not just planning to get a conservatorship. They were perfectly willing to accept my death as a secondary, equally profitable outcome. They had built a machine with 2 functions: steal my life, or end it, whichever came first. I felt the room spin, but this time, it was not the tea. It was the truth. As I gripped the workbench, my phone, which I had placed beside Arthur's computer, buzzed. It was not a text. It was the live feed from the recorder in the study. I pressed the speaker button. We heard Bianca's voice, bright and efficient. She was on the phone. "Yes, that is correct. Friday, at 10 a.m., she said. We heard the clicking of her keyboard. "The assessor will be here." "Oh, yes. We will absolutely make sure she is ready. She has been very confused this week. Poor thing." There was a pause. I could hear Mark's muffled voice in the background, prompting her. "Ah, one last thing," Bianca said, her tone sharpening. "My husband just wants to confirm that he will be bringing the correct papers, the ones for the full, comprehensive conservatorship, the emergency petition. We have been advised that given her rapid decline, that is the most appropriate path." She listened for another moment. "Wonderful. We will see him on Friday." The call ended. The study was silent. Arthur and I just stared at each other. Today was Tuesday, Friday, 10 a.m. They had given me a deadline. In 3 days. A man I had never met would arrive at my home, armed with papers, ready to judge my sanity while I was being actively, methodically poisoned. I folded the lab report and placed it in my pocket. The fear had turned into something else, something cold and dense. It was the feeling I used to get at Mid-Valley insurers just before I uncovered a massive, systemic fraud. It was a cold, pure rage. "They have scheduled it, Arthur," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "They have put it on the calendar. What do we do?" "Josephine." "We let them," I said, walking to the door. "We let them come, but we are going to change the guest list." The police were a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed the one person David and I trusted to handle the numbers, because that is all this was, a very ugly, very personal, hostile takeover. I did not use my house phone. I did not use my cell phone. I went into David's study, their office, and retrieved the old emergency satellite phone he had kept in his desk for doomsday scenarios. I took it to the garage, closed the door, and dialed the private number of Mrs. Thorne. Mrs. Thorne was not a family lawyer in the sentimental sense. She was a weapon. She was a cold, brilliant estate and probate litigator who had built the financial fortress that David and I lived in. She despised emotional inefficiency and, above all, she despised people who were sloppy. I met her at her office in the city an hour later. I had not bothered to change out of my slacks. I carried a single briefcase. Arthur had given me the recordings on a USB drive and printed out the life insurance call log, which he had pulled from my online phone records. I had the $500 lab report on the tee. I sat across from her polished mahogany desk. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "Josephine," she said, her voice like dry ice. "You look stressed. This is not a social call." "It is not," I said. I opened the briefcase and laid the items out in order: the lab report, the printed call log, the USB drive. "This is a chemical analysis of a substance my son and daughter-in-law are feeding me daily. This is a record of my son's call to my life insurance provider, inquiring about accidental death at home clauses. And this," I said, tapping the drive, "is a recording of them planning to have me declared mentally incompetent on Friday at 10 a.m. by a fraudulent assessor, so they can gain a full medical conservatorship." Mrs. Thorne did not flinch. She did not gasp. She simply put on her reading glasses, picked up the lab report, and read. She read every word. Then she read the call log. Then she inserted the USB drive into her desktop computer, put on a pair of sleek headphones, and listened. I watched her face, searching for any flicker of shock or outrage. There was none. She was simply absorbing data. After 10 minutes, she took the headphones off, swiveled in her chair, and looked at me. A thin, dangerous smile touched the corner of her mouth. "They are not just stupid, Josephine," she said. "They are sloppy." It was the most comforting thing I had heard in 6 months. We will not be stopping the Friday appointment, she declared, her voice now sharp, cutting. We are going to let it happen. This assessor. He is not their key witness. He is ours. They want legal papers. She gave a short, mirthless laugh. We will give them legal papers. We will bury them in them. She turned to her monitor and began typing with ferocious speed. The plan is simple. They are setting a stage for your decline. We will merely be adjusting the lighting and adding to the cast of characters. But to do this, you must continue to be the perfect victim. You must be frail, confused, and terrified. You must play your part until the curtain rises. Can you do that? I have been rehearsing, I said. Good. She stopped typing and looked at me. Because they have made a critical error. Josephine. They have forgotten about the real will, the one you and David drafted with me. They are trying to steal an inheritance they have already forfeited. She pulled a thick, bound document from her credenza and flipped to a marked page. You and David were always cautious. You anticipated trouble. She turned the document around for me to read. It was Article 7, the toxic clause. I read the words I had not seen in a decade. It stated, in cold, ironclad legal language, that any beneficiary who was found to have used fraud, duress, or undue influence to manipulate the testator, or who attempted to gain control of the assets by fraudulent means while the testator was still alive, would be immediately and permanently disinherited. Their share would be dissolved, and they would be treated as if they had predeceased me. They have already done it, I breathed, pointing to the lab report. They are trying to poison me. And how do we prove that? She countered, closing the will. How do we prove it irrefutably? Right now. It is a recording they will claim is fake and a lab report from a man we paid in cash. They will paint you as a paranoid old woman who is setting them up. A judge might see reasonable doubt. No. We need them to confess. We need them to hang themselves, in public, in front of witnesses. She looked at the clock on her wall. Friday, 10 a.m. We have less than 72 hours to build a gallows. I walked back into my house, the weight of Mrs. Thorne's strategy pressing down on me. I was no longer Josephine, the grieving widow. I was an actress. And this was the most important performance of my life. I had until Friday morning, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 3 days to complete my collapse. I began that evening. At dinner. I stared at Bianca for a long, uncomfortable moment. She was explaining a story about the grocery store. I let my face crease in polite confusion. I'm so sorry, dear. I interrupted, my voice soft and frail. You have been so kind to me, and I cannot, for the life of me, remember your name right now. Is it Brenda? Mark dropped his fork. Bianca's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of fury so quick I almost missed it. But it was gone in an instant. It is Bianca. Josephine, she said, her voice tight. Oh, of course. Bianca. How silly of me, I murmured, looking down at my plate. I did not look up, but I did not have to. I could feel the triumphant look they exchanged over the top of my head. The next morning, Wednesday, I escalated. I was carrying my teacup to the sink. Mark was standing by the counter, reading his phone. I waited until he was right in my path. Then I let my hand go limp. The porcelain cup hit the tile floor and exploded into a dozen pieces. I cried out, a high, thin sound. I just, it slipped. My hands are so weak today. Mark and Bianca rushed over. For God's sake, Bianca hissed before catching herself. Oh, Josephine, please, do not try to help. She grabbed the broom. You should just sit down. Let us handle this. We do not want you falling. Her words were a threat wrapped in concern. That night, I added paranoia. I walked into the living room, where they were watching a loud television program. I clutched my robe at my throat. Who is that? I whispered, pointing to the darkest corner of the room. There is a man. By the window. He is watching us. Mark sighed, but it was a sigh of satisfaction. He stood up and walked to the corner, flipping on a light. It is just the coat rack. Mum? See just the shadows. No, I insisted, letting my voice tremble. I saw him. He was right there. I let them guide me back to my room, allowing myself to be calmed by their condescending assurances. They were overjoyed. My performance was, if anything, too convincing. They responded exactly as I knew they would. They increased the dosage. The herbal tea Bianca brought me on Wednesday night was darker, the steam rising from it thick with that damp, earthy smell. It was potent. This will help you rest. Josephine, she cooed. You have been so agitated. I knew I could not drink it, but I also knew they were watching. Arthur, anticipating this, had provided me with a tool, but not the one I expected. He had not given me capsules, he had given me advice. Sleight of hand, Josephine. They want to see you drink, so let them see you. I brought the mug to my lips, my hand shaking violently. I let the hot rim touch my mouth. It is so hot. I whimpered. I took the tiniest, shallowest sip imaginable, just enough to wet my lips. I held it in my mouth, then put the cup down. When Bianca turned to fluff my pillows, I discreetly spit the small amount into the handkerchief I held in my other hand. The rest would be poured into the moisturizer jar when they were gone. Mrs. Thorne had also given me a piece of technology. It was a brooch, a heavy, old-fashioned gold piece that had belonged to David's grandmother. It was ornate, ugly, and perfect. The camera lens is right here. Mrs. Thorne had pointed, tapping the center of a small, dark stone. The microphone is pinhole. It records high-definition video and audio. Wear it. Wear it every time you're in the same room as them. We need to see their faces when they think they are winning. I had it pinned to the collar of my robe. It was running. Thursday night. The eve of the battle. It was time for my final move. I waited until 10 o'clock, well after they had tucked me in. I pressed the tiny button on the side of the brooch to ensure it was recording. Then, I screamed. They burst into my room, Mark in his pajama pants, Bianca pulling her robe closed. They looked annoyed, but also excited. This was it. Mark! I cried, clutching his arm as he approached the bed. My voice was a desperate, broken thing. Mark, I am so sick. I feel terrible. I let tears stream down my face. I thought I saw your father. He was right here. I pointed to the empty chair in the corner. He was standing in the hallway, looking at me. I am so scared. I clung to him, the perfect, terrified widow. What day is it? I demanded. It is December, is not it? It is so cold. Why is it so dark in the morning? I watched their faces, over my shoulder, where they thought I could not see. Bianca and Mark looked at each other. They did not just smile, they beamed. It was a look of pure, ecstatic victory. This was the final nail. This was the performance that would sign their papers. Bianca moved forward, her face a mask of sickening sympathy. She stroked my hair. "Oh, Mom, it is okay," she whispered, her voice like poison. "It is not December, dear. It is June. You are just confused. But do not you worry." Mark put his hand over mine. "We are going to get you help. Mom," he said, his voice heavy with false sincerity. "Tomorrow. We have someone coming tomorrow. A specialist. He is going to help you." "A specialist?" I asked, my voice small. "Yes," Bianca said, pulling the blankets up to my chin. "He will make everything better. Now. You just sleep. Tomorrow. All of this confusion will be over." They left the room, their heads bent together, whispering excitedly. I lay back against the pillows, my heart like a drum. I reached up and steadily, with a hand that was not shaking at all, I pressed the button on the brooch. "Yes," I whispered to the empty, bugged room. "Tomorrow. It will all be over." Friday. The day of the judgment. I was ready. At 9:50 in the morning, I took my position in the living room armchair. I had not slept, but it was not from fear, it was from focus. I had spent the early morning hours ensuring my costume was perfect. My silver hair was uncombed, a wild, thin mess around my face. I wore my most expensive silk pajama set, a deliberate contrast to my dishevelment, creating the precise image of a wealthy woman who had tragically and completely lost her grip. I pinned the brooch, my silent witness, to my lapel, my hands, resting on the arms of the chair, maintained a steady, practiced tremor. Mark and Bianca sat on the sofa opposite me. They were dressed in subdued, dark colours, as if for a sombre occasion. They were playing the part of the grieving, dutiful children. They sat forward, their arms crossed, radiating a barely contained, vibrating impatience. They were predators, waiting for the feast to be blessed. The grandfather clock in the foyer began to chime. The sound was heavy, final. It struck 10. As the 10th chime faded, the doorbell rang, exactly on cue. Mark was on his feet before the sound had fully stopped. He practically ran to the door, his eagerness cutting through the sombre performance. He opened it. The assessor stepped inside. He was a man named Alistair, though I doubted it was his real name. He was precisely as Arthur's description of the man from the van, well-dressed, in an expensive-looking suit, with a practiced, trustworthy face and a thick leather briefcase. He looked like a man who sold bad investments to vulnerable people. He glided into the living room, his eyes flicking over the expensive furniture, assessing the value of the room before he even looked at me. He gave Mark a brief, sympathetic nod. Then he turned his professional gaze on me. He did not sit. He stood over me, projecting authority and medical expertise. "Good morning, Josephine," he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone. "I am Dr. Alistair. I am just here to have a little chat. Can you tell me, do you know what day it is today?" I let my head loll to the side, as if the effort of holding it up was too much. I stared past him, toward the large window. "It is October," I mumbled, my voice thin and reedy. "The leaves, all falling. It is so cold." It was, of course, a warm day in June. I watched him. He did not take notes. He did not need to. He had his script. He smiled, a small, patronizing smile directed at Mark and Bianca. It was the smile of a transaction successfully completed. "I see," he said. He clicked open his briefcase on the coffee table. It was full of pre-printed, official-looking documents. He pulled out a thick stack, already clipped together. "Josephine," he said, his voice shifting, taking on a tone of finality. "Given your clear disorientation and the rapid decline your family has reported, we are going to get you some help." He tapped the papers. "This is a petition for an emergency medical and financial conservatorship. It is just a formality. It will allow your son and his wife to manage your affairs, to make sure you are safe and your bills are paid. All we need is your signature to show you consent." He pulled a heavy, silver pen from his suit pocket and clicked it. He leaned in, placing the top page in front of me, and pointed to the signature line at the bottom. "Right here, dear." My trembling hand, the one I had kept shaking for an hour, began its slow, painful journey toward the pen. I could feel the victory vibrating from Bianca. I could see the greed in Mark's eyes. They were leaning forward. My fingers were an inch from the pen. The doorbell rang again. The sound was a sonic boom in the quiet room. It was loud, sharp, and absolutely not part of their plan. Bianca's head snapped toward the door, her face twisting in rage. "Who on earth is that?" she hissed, her voice losing its sympathetic tone. "Mark, I thought you told them no interruptions." "I did," Mark snapped, his face flushed with anger at the interruption. "Stay here," he ordered Alistair, as if he were an employee. He stomped to the front door, pulling it open aggressively. "What do you—" His voice died in his throat. He just stood there, his hand on the doorknob, frozen. He did not move. He did not speak. He just stared. "Mark," Bianca called, her voice rising in panic. "Get rid of them. Who is it?" Mark did not answer. He took a small step backward. "And Mrs." Thorne stepped forward, moving past him and into the foyer. Her sharp-toed heels clicked on the hardwood floor with the sound of a judge's gavel. She was not alone. Behind her, his face grim, was Arthur. And behind Arthur, filling the doorway, solid and impassive, were two uniformed police officers. Mrs. Thorne did not look at Mark or Bianca. Her focus was laser-sharp on the man holding the pen. "Dr. Alistair," she announced, her voice ringing with absolute authority in the stunned silence. "I believe you will find that you hold no valid medical license in the state of Ohio. You are, in fact, not a doctor at all. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted assault." Alistair's practiced, sympathetic face went completely white. He looked at Mark, then at Bianca, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. The first police officer stepped forward, wordlessly took the silver pen from Alistair's limp hand, and efficiently replaced it with handcuffs. "Sir, you need to come with us." The illusion shattered. Bianca, seeing her entire plan disintegrate, lunged forward. Her face, moments before a mask of concern, was now twisted with rage. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You cannot do this. My mother is sick. She is confused. She told us she saw her dead husband, Mark. Tell them how sick she is." I placed my palms flat on the arms of my chair. My practiced tremor was gone. I pushed myself up to my full height, standing straight and solid. I looked directly at Bianca, and for the first time since she had entered my home, I let her see the analyst. "She is not your mother, Bianca?" I said. My voice was not thin, It was not reedy. It was low, steady, and cold. And I am not sick. Mrs. Thorne was already moving. Arthur, she commanded. Arthur stepped forward and placed a small, portable projector on the coffee table. Pushing the useless conservatorship papers onto the floor, Mrs. Thorne aimed it at the large, white wall above the fireplace. An image flashed onto the wall. It was the 5-page lab report, its conclusions highlighted in yellow. This, Mrs. Thorne said, her voice narrating the evidence like a lecture, is the chemical analysis of the herbal tea you, Bianca, have been brewing for Josephine for the past 2 weeks. It details, as you can see, how the specific compounds interact with her prescribed beta blockers to induce severe vertigo, cognitive fog, and cardiac arrhythmia. In short, manufacturing the symptoms of senility. She clicked. A new image appeared. It was a photograph I had taken of my dead, wilted fern. The result of your care. She clicked again. A screenshot of Mark's cell phone records. And this, Mark, is the log of your call to your mother's life insurance provider, placed just 2 days ago, where you inquired specifically about the payout clauses for accidental death at home. Mark made a small, gagging sound. And now, Mrs. Thorne continued. The audio? Arthur connected his laptop to a small, powerful speaker. He pressed a key. The room was suddenly filled with their voices, clear as a bell. First, Bianca. Just need her to seem out of it at the right moment. The confusion is the key. Then Mark's reply. What about that herbal tea? Is it working? Then Bianca again, explaining the assessor. When he gets here, she will not be able to answer basic questions. We get the medical conservatorship. Full control. Right now. Arthur played the last file. It was Mark. Alone. A fall down the stairs. Perhaps, or, say, an adverse reaction? Would that be covered under the standard payout? The recording clicked off. The hum of the projector was the only sound. Mark was trembling, his face slick with sweat. Bianca stared at the wall, her expression frozen in disbelief. The second police officer, who had been standing impassively by the door, took 2 steps forward. He looked directly at them. Mark and Bianca, he said, his voice formal and final. You both have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The word court was the final blow. Mark dissolved. He collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands, and began to sob. They were not tears of remorse. They were the wails of a child who had been caught. No, he choked out, looking up, his face a pathetic mess. He pointed a shaking finger at his wife. It was her. It was all her idea. The tea. The doctor. She said it was normal. She said we were helping her. She set it all up. Bianca stared at him, her eyes wide with the shock of his betrayal. Mum, Mark begged, sliding off the sofa and onto his knees, crawling toward me. Mum, please. I did not mean to. I love you. It was Bianca. Please, tell them. I looked down at my son. I searched my heart for any lingering trace of love, any spark of pity. I found nothing. Only the cold, clean emptiness of a ledger that had been balanced. I saw a stranger, weeping on my floor, blaming his wife for the plan he had eagerly followed, for the insurance money he had investigated on his own. That fake will, I said. my voice cutting cleanly through his sobs. The one you were both so desperate to see. That was a loyalty test. It was your one chance to prove you were my son. I let the words hang in the silent room. And you failed. I turned away from him, leaving him on the floor. I looked at Mrs. Thorne, who was already packing her projector, her work here done. Mrs. Thorne? I said. Execute the toxic clause. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am really curious. Where in the world are you all listening from today? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, and if this story resonated with you, go ahead and like the video. Be sure to support us by hitting that hype button too, so this story can be heard by more people.